My true story from Michigan. They forgot my 80th birthday, but remembered to transfer my name off the will right after my husband's funeral, but they didn't know one thing. I let them sign. Then, I let the bank speak for me. I raised my teacup, steady, as the morning light filtered through the kitchen window. It was my 80th birthday, nominally, though that number felt heavy in a body that had already carried several decades past it. I was excited, dare I admit, a quiet happiness stirring in my chest, until I heard them. My sons and my daughter, all three, were seated at the table beyond my table, their backs to me as they sipped coffee and chopped breakfast. 80 years old and still expecting presents? "Mom, you should know your place," began my eldest, Michael, his words flat and dismissive. I swallowed around the lump in my throat and kept my eyes on the teacup's delicate pattern. My daughter, Caroline, looked up from scrolling through her phone and added, "Your name on the will is just dead weight now. They've already updated it, don't worry." She emphasized the last words as though sharing a secret they were proud of. My youngest, Rebecca, poured another cup of coffee and set it down with unnecessary care. "Just sign this thing, Mom. Help us with the paperwork. Easy enough, no big deal," she said, and passed a thin document across the table. I recognized it by the hospital script, updated will and estate transfers. I forced a slight smile as the paper landed in front of me. I lifted my eyes toward the small altar where my husband, Jonathan, had been laid to rest 2 months ago. I met the photo of him, kind eyes, soft gray hair, the man who had promised on our 50th wedding anniversary that I would always matter in our home. That promise felt like a lie now. Michael scoffed before turning his attention to his plate. Caroline tapped her foot, impatient. Rebecca adjusted the papers as though she were straightening curtains. They did not ask how I was. They did not wish me a happy birthday. They reminded me that I was no longer relevant. I took a breath. I pictured myself signing the will today. I pictured my name wiped away, along with everything I had ever believed I owned or meant in this family. But I remembered the promise that had been made years ago. I remembered the man on that mantel, the sound of his voice in our bedroom when I had cried after my first stroke. "We built this together. You built this family," he had said. "They would remove me, they would erase me, but I would not vanish." So I held the pen with a quiet dignity. I didn't clear my throat. I didn't ask for acknowledgement. When I signed, my signature smooth, practiced, final. They relaxed visibly. Rebecca folded the document and tucked it away like hidden loot. Caroline smirked. Michael nodded and said, "Okay, that's done. You don't have to worry anymore." Just then, Michael glanced at the photograph of Jonathan and me, behind me. He whispered something I did not hear, then looked at his mother with a flicker of unease. But his expression hardened, and he shrugged toward his siblings, as if daring them to notice me. I looked again at their faces. No guilt, no warmth, no memory of the years of sacrifice, of the nights I sat with them through fevers, of the vacations I gave up so they could have lessons they wanted. Nothing but the present calculation of convenience. My birthday remained uncelebrated. I did not speak. I rose from the kitchen chair, folded the napkin beside my teacup, and left the room without a word. I caught a glimpse of the clock, 8:05 a.m., time passing, people living, ignoring what was right in front of them. I walked slowly to the room where I kept my papers from the old house, the life we had built in Michigan before moving here. Filing cabinet still held deeds, letters, tax returns, life insurance policies, and photographs of birthdays past. I remembered the smile of my daughter on her 18th, the tears of my son's high school graduation. I remembered that behind each of those photographs were dinners, some of which I had cooked, while the kids sat at that same table. I remembered the promise, "You'll always have a place." I closed the cabinet door. I pressed my palm against it. I whispered under my breath, "I haven't forgotten either." Later that morning, I walked out of the house, my daughters-in-law and daughters still murmuring behind me. I smiled politely, though my heart pulsed with purpose. I had my plan, I had my proof, I had the bank. They had given me the pen. They believed I'd signed their will, fade away, become irrelevant. But I wasn't signing away what mattered. I was signing in silence. And I would let the bank and the law speak for me. I never imagined that stepping into my home after my husband passed would feel like entering someone else's house. but that's exactly how it happened. Years ago, after our daughter's graduation and our son's college graduation, my husband and I sold our small Cape Cod in rural Michigan to help our children build their futures. We used the proceeds to buy a modest condo near the city so the kids, Michael, Caroline, and Rebecca, could have a safe place to come home to. My husband and I moved into a smaller apartment, saying we were downsizing, but really, we were building a legacy. I became the family's financial organizer by habit. I balanced budgets and tracked tax returns. I signed the paperwork to transfer the condo into my daughter's name because she was taking out a loan for her own business. I switched our savings into Rebecca's account so she'd have cash for graduate school. I helped my son and his wife with a down payment for their own home, used my retirement funds to fill the gap, believing they would repay me when they could. I remember the year my husband and I took the train to Chicago for a quiet anniversary week in a tiny bed and breakfast. I was balancing spreadsheets until midnight, making sure my daughter's rent was paid, my son's mortgage deposit was squared away, and our own bills were up to date. My husband teased me, calling me the queen of nickels and budgets, but he smiled, because I loved them, all of them, and I thought that's what family did. Over the last decade, each of them seemed to do exactly what I had hoped. Michael graduated from business school and got a job in finance. Caroline opened her bakery, and thanks to that condominium fund, she had a full kitchen and a quiet apartment. Rebecca finished her master's degree and became a school counselor. All three of them had thrived. And yet, it seemed like none of that long memory was worth a birthday cake. After my husband's stroke, we moved again, to live near my son's home in Michigan. They had built a 2-bedroom addition, and they said I could make it my own space. It sounded nice. I'd have a room, a bathroom nearby. In reality, that room quickly became storage. He installed shelves, she painted the walls a neutral gray, and I became their silent guest. Sometimes lunch, sometimes errands, but always disposable. When the anniversary of my husband's stroke arrived, they threw us a quiet dinner. Me, Michael, and his family. The wife, the pediatrician they hired, and no one else. There was no mention of our 35th anniversary. I sat across from their newborn and drank a glass of wine I didn't really want. I felt the shift. My role had changed. I was no longer the backbone, I was decoration. Still, hope somehow lingered in me. A wish that maybe, just maybe, we could revisit Saturdays at the old dining table in Michigan, with birthday candles and mashed potatoes and laughter. When my husband passed, I let them plan the funeral. I did not argue when they asked me to contribute to the floral fund. I let them tell me it was too much to ask me to speak, even though I had said my vows so many times I could have recited them blindfolded. We sold that condo, the one I had helped fund. I did not mind. It was money I had set aside, after all, not that I expected gratitude, just respect. And then I moved into the gray edition, the one I had not repainted. The truth is, they may have forgotten who I was. They may have forgotten what it cost me. 40 years of early mornings and late nights, balancing finances and emotions, carrying their dreams on my tired back. I remember coming home from the bank one day, sorting through my mail, and seeing a small thank you card from a neighbor whose dog I had walked when they were on vacation. Inside, it read, "You are always so kind. Thank you for taking time to help." I placed it on the mantel and thought of how little it took to feel seen, and yet somehow my own family could not manage a single note. Now, in that room, with neutral gray walls, I sat and replayed the morning's exchange. They offered no cake, no balloons, no celebration, just a will, a form, and a reminder that my name was no longer theirs to carry, or perhaps no longer needed. I thought of my husband's final words. "We built this life together. Don't ever let them tell you it's not yours anymore." Yet here they were, so eager to erase me. I closed the file cabinet where I kept the documents I had once sorted, property deeds, tax paperwork, their graduation diplomas. I realized one thing. I may have lost their gratitude, but not my memory, not my skill. I still knew how wealth moved through paperwork. I still knew how to anchor a legacy, legally and irrevocably. So I spent that afternoon reviewing the banking documents I'd submitted a month ago, the ones that said in clear legal language, no change to account ownership or value unless signed by Eleanor Jean and notarized by a bank official. I turned a key in my memory. My signature had changed slightly 6 months ago at the bank, and I had set a condition that any future wills or transfers had to be countersigned and stamped. I closed my eyes and heard my husband's voice again. You love them all so much, but don't give away the bridge you built. At night, I lay in bed, feeling the dull ache in my heart, but also the warmth of purpose. They had seen me as irrelevant. They had thought nothing of forgetting my birthday. They had taken me for granted. But I would remind them, and more than that, I would leave them with the unmistakable voice of the institution they had depended on but ignored, the bank. I had given them my name, I had given them my money, I had given them my years. Now, I would give them their limits. Because sometimes love requires you to guard what matters, even if the only ones you've taught to value it forget. I sat at the dining table after they left, the morning light silencing the echoes of their voices. The will lay before me, crisp and official-looking. I lifted the pen, not to relinquish, but to confirm. I signed where they asked, my signature steady and unreadable. I was thinking ahead, not out of defiance, but out of preservation. 4 weeks earlier, I had quietly arranged a meeting at the local branch of our bank, the one my husband and I had used for nearly half a century. I asked to speak with the estate officer, a friendly woman named Lisa who remembered helping me deposit Christmas checks for the grandchildren. I said I wanted to update some things, my account instructions, my signature, and an additional layer of protection. She pulled out a form labeled Dual Authorization Directive. It stated plainly, no withdrawal, transfer, or change in account beneficiaries may occur without the account holder's verified signature, the bank's official seal, and a notarized statement from the holder. I nodded, signing in front of the notary. I asked her to attach the directive to not just the bank account, but also to any associated will or trust instructions. Then I requested to update my signature on file. It had changed slightly over time, my handwriting getting shakier. I practiced in front of the bank teller, signing my name with intentional clarity. ELEANORJEANHARPER. I knew they would validate it later. I left the bank that day with a neatly stamped folder of legal paperwork, a copy for me, a copy for the bank's records, and a note to keep a sealed copy with my lawyer. I tucked the banker's thank you cookie wrapper in my purse. I smiled at the ordinary comfort of breakfast snacks, oblivious to how they would become vital. Now, at home, I had signed the new will. I tucked it into a plain envelope and slid it into my robe pocket. I walked to my old bedroom, once shared with Jonathan, to retrieve the sealed packet from the bank and the notary's acknowledgement letter. From my purse I removed the legal agreement and put it in another envelope. My heart felt calm because I had done what I believed, prudent, not vengeful. I rearranged my afternoon around secret errands. I visited Frances, the lawyer friend I had known since I started working at the courthouse. I handed her both envelopes, her expression tight with respect. There was no other way, I told her. I signed quietly, so they'd think it was done, but this, I tapped the banker's packet, this seals it. Frances nodded and packed the documents into her briefcase. We'll keep this sealed until the moment the bank refuses to honor the new will or any withdrawals. I returned home slowly, enjoying the weight of the afternoon sun through the curtains, as if each beam reminded me that light and truth always finds its way. I did not mention any of this during dinner. Instead, I passed the casserole dish and smiled. They told me how much they appreciated the meal, each spoonful complimenting Mom's cooking. I kept my smile, but my thoughts were far from that kitchen table. That night, I reviewed one last time the checklist I'd made. Will signed, dual authorization in bank files, signature updated and verified, legal copies with Frances, no note, no clue, just calm. I slid into bed, aware of my breathing, my pulse, and the promise inside that sealed paper. They thought they had removed me. They did not know I had already fortified everything that mattered. And soon, when they tried to impose their will, the bank would speak instead. Sleep came to me afterward, like a quiet breath of triumph. The morning was crisp and clear. I had taken the bus downtown, not wanting to drive myself just in case something happened during the confrontation. I wore a simple navy coat, my silver hair tucked neatly, and a calm expression. In my purse I carried the sealed packet from the bank and another from my lawyer. I didn't glance at them. I wouldn't need to. I arrived at the branch just after opening. I took the stairs to the executive office on the second floor. The receptionist nodded at me by name. She and I had shared holiday greetings in the lobby last year. I returned a polite smile without showing my purpose. The branch manager, Mr. Green, greeted me in his office. He was tall, silver-haired, wearing the placid expression of someone used to handling client crises. I sat down while he stood by the window overlooking Main Street. "Mrs. Harper, thank you for coming," he said, glancing at his watch. "Your son said he'd be here today to transfer funds. He is on his way," I replied. "I asked him to come here directly." Green nodded. "All right, we will handle this on our side." I watched as he tapped a button on his computer. I felt my heart steady. I thought of the packet in my purse and the sealed opportunity it represented. I thought of Jonathan's voice whispering courage to me from beyond the threshold of loss. Shortly after, the door opened. Michael stepped in, dressed in his tailored suit, a forced calm in his posture. He carried a leather wallet and a folder with official-looking papers. He looked surprised when he saw me. "Mom?" he said, voice catching slightly. I did not respond. I merely watched him. He spotted Mr. Green and approached the manager's desk. "Yes, we're here for the transfer," Green gestured. "Please have a seat. I will run through the protocol with you." He turned back to me. "And Mrs. Harper, thank you for meeting us." I nodded once. Michael opened his folder and handed over the new will document. "This is the updated will removing Mom's name from the beneficiaries. We'd like to transfer $250,000 into our family account now." Green took the document with a measured air. He said nothing. He smiled, before slowly scanning its contents and typing something. I saw Green's posture stiffen a little. He set the document down. He opened the files on his desk. I felt tension gather in the room. Time slowed. Green finally looked at me. His face was calm, but eyes serious. He cleared his throat. "I am sorry, Mr. Harper. At this time, we cannot process this request." Michael frowned, as did his wife's face in his peripheral vision. She stood in the room's doorway, phone in hand. Green continued, "Our records show that Mrs. Eleanor Harper updated her account mandate just 4 weeks ago. Any transfer or change requires her verified signature and the bank's official seal." Michael's eyes turned to me. "That's not right. Mom signed the will." His voice held anger now. "You can't block this." Green brought out a printed notice and placed it on the desk. "Sir, this is a formal notice of account freeze. The bank must refuse transactions that do not meet these conditions. Please read carefully." Michael snatched the paper angrily. He read it. His face went pale. Rachel stepped forward into the office and hissed, "You're making a mistake." "I'm sorry," Green said again. "Our policy is clear. We cannot override the account holder's instructions." Michael slammed his folder closed, eyes flicking to me again. "Mom, this is embarrassing." I did not answer. Green closed his files. "As a courtesy, we may hold an in-branch review if there is a notarized rescission or countermanding directive from Mrs. Harper herself." Michael looked at me with desperation. Can you just say something?" But I had no intention of speaking. I had said enough, quietly, under the regulations, with every document in place. His face shifted. Anger, confusion, fear. Green stood. "Thank you for your time. The transfer will be blocked effective immediately, and the account flagged accordingly. The funds are under hold pending your mom's direction." I left the office without a word. Outside, I breathed deep, looking up at the blue sky. I had stepped back into a world that had tried to forget me. Michael and Rachel followed, his shoulders tight, her lips pale. I walked away slowly. Downstairs, in the lobby, where I once dropped in for forms or holiday greetings, I took one last look at them, pacing, voices low and urgent. I walked out into the street, the door closing softly behind me. By the time I reached the sidewalk, I felt the weight lift. I sensed delivery, my presence registered by every contract and clause I had shaped. Over the next few days, the story would spread, the granddaughter would share the notice with a local reporter. Comments would flood in. A brave senior. Finally, someone stood up to the kids who think inheritance equals entitlement. Bank policy saved her. Authentication isn't optional. In the evenings, I drank tea in my quiet apartment and thought of the day. I thought of the power of silence combined with structure. I thought of how justice sometimes takes the form of procedure, and how granite roots beneath even a veneer of family pain. I never yelled. I never called lawyers to scold them. I trusted the system. I let the bank speak for me, and for every senior whose worth is enshrined in contracts and laws and not compassionless mouths. They forgot my birthday. They thought they could erase me, but I stood before the institution that holds every line in writing and proved the strength of being seen and heard without raising my voice. I was alone in my apartment just after dinner when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with my daughter's name, Caroline. I settled into my chair, cradling a warm mug of herbal tea, preparing for what would come next. The call connected. I could hear her voice before I saw her name, raw and furious. "You think you're clever, Mom," she spat. "You think hiding behind bank policies makes you a hero?" Her words slashed through me, but I remained silent. I had spoken when it mattered most. "Enough games," she hissed. "We're your children, and we've done everything for you, paid for the condo, helped you since your stroke, even sheltered you under our roof, and what do? You play tricks, signing nonsense so the bank can freeze what's rightfully ours." I breathed steadily, sipping my tea. "Rightfully ours?" she laughed, a hollow echo. "You always think you're smarter than everyone. God, you're cunning. You think you'll die alone, and then what? We have to clean up your mess." A pause. "I am not a villain, Caroline," I said calmly. "Don't you dare patronize me," she screamed. "You're 80 years old and still scheming. You're using loopholes and paperwork to punish us. You're pathetic." My grip on the phone tightened. I remembered the year I held her when she cried over a failed school test. The nights I sat at my husband's hospital bedside, comforting her. Now she called me pathetic. "Pathetic?" I repeated softly. "I wonder what word you'll use when you realize it wasn't a loophole, it was planning." Her voice caught. "Planning? You don't know us anymore, Mom." "And what do you call forgetting to wish me happy birthday?" I asked. My voice remained level. Her breath trembled. "Birthdays don't matter. Inheritances do." "Inheritances come and go," I said, forcing warmth into my tone. "Character lasts." There was a silence, tense and sharp. Then she spoke again. "Bon vaut bien donc lao. Better that than us dealing with your schemes." Her words landed heavy, worse than any blow I'd expected. My throat tightened. I felt the weight of years in that sentence, ungrateful, cruel, detached. I did not speak. I ended the call. I set the phone on the table, watching it face down. My breath slowed. I let the anger rise, but I did not unleash it. Instead, I felt pride. Not pride in their reaction, but in myself. I had passed the test I didn't ask for, to remain composed while she raged. I had built a fortress around myself with quiet, careful strategy. I walked to the mantel and touched the small figures of my grandchildren, smiling from a photograph taken at a summer picnic. Caroline had held my hand that day, telling me I was her hero, her backbone. I allowed myself one tear, but it came with gratitude. Gratitude that I had done what I did for them, and gratitude that I no longer needed their approval to know my worth. I turned off the lamp and sat in silence. The apartment hummed softly in the night. Outside a dog barked, a car passed. Life moved quietly while my mind was loud with resolution. In the morning I woke and went through my routine. Breakfast, tea, exercises. I read a legal brief online about elder rights. I signed up for community educational webinars. I answered one email from a neighbor who thanked me for the talk I gave at the local library. "You changed how I think." I thought of my daughter again. I thought of the pain beneath her anger, and I forgave her. Not because she deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Their aggression did not weaken me. It reminded me. Their anger laid bare their desperation and my strength. I moved forward quietly, confidently, a woman 80 years old, navigating threats not with screams, but with silence that holds power. And that night, I wrote in my journal, "They called me pathetic, but they cannot break my resolve. Only my silence can do that. And I choose to use silence wisely, not as submission, but as strategy. They attack, I stand." I closed the book and lay down, not angry, but unshakable. Because speaking does not always mean shouting, and winning does not always mean breaking the silence. By midweek, the news was no longer just whispers in my hallway. It had become public. I was folding laundry in my modest living room when a knock came at the door. It opened to reveal a young reporter, polite, press khaki outfit, notebook in hand. Summerfield Press ran a quick article with the headline, Michigan Grandma Freezes $250, 0 cents, K transfer after bank enforces her new will policies. The story quoted me directly. My children thought forgetting my birthday was acceptable. They thought I didn't know. They forgot I built this. I invited the reporter in for tea. We sat across from each other as I retold the timeline. The silent birthday, the will signing, the bank's refusal. She was attentive, nodding slowly. She asked about my motivations. I said I did not want confrontation. I wanted my voice, calmly, to matter. Within hours, the online version gained traction. Local TV saw the clicks and picked up the story. They called me for a live interview. On camera, I wore a simple sweater. My hair was brushed neatly. The reporter asked, Mrs. Harper, were you afraid of confrontation? I answered, I was prepared. I believed in the rules I set. I trusted the bank would speak for me. The segment aired in the evening news slot. I sat on my couch, watching myself describe the legal process. I described elder rights, the importance of dual authorization. I noted how many seniors hesitate to assert themselves. That night, emails poured in. A woman from Grand Rapids wrote, Thank you for teaching me to stand up quietly. My husband and I regained power in his trust thanks to your example. A man from Lansing said, My mother lives with me and I thought I was helping. After seeing your story, I called her and asked how she felt. A counselor wrote, Our center invited me to show your segment to families. People watched in silence, then cried. On social media, comments flooded beneath the digital article. She's a hero. Finally, someone shows seniors aren't helpless. Let's celebrate her on her 80th, not forget. I read each message quietly. Some evening, I printed a few and taped them to the living room mirror. I left space between them so I would see my strength reflected back clearly. That weekend, I was invited to speak at a town hall gathering at the county library. The event was called Emerging Voices, Elder Justice and Rights. I stood before a room filled with local officials, social workers, educators, and seniors. I began, Thank you for inviting me, not because I did anything extraordinary, but because I decided to use the tools I had. I shared details of the bank directive. I explained how minor legal maneuvers can create real protection. I told them, seniors do not need loud protests. We need clear voices backed by systems that listen. The audience listened attentively. At the end, many approached me, a retired teacher, a nurse, an accountant. They asked how I handled deadlines. They asked how to help others implement similar safeguards. One woman gently touched my arm and said, You gave me hope, for myself and my husband. I felt a soft hum of purpose. That Sunday, the local church invited me to speak briefly after service. The pastor introduced me. We are honored to have among us someone who stood not with anger, but with clarity, a woman who used her faith in rules to protect her truth. I spoke for 5 minutes about love, responsibility, and boundaries. I looked around and saw nods, tears, and recognition. I also received an unexpected message. A small nonprofit that fights elder financial abuse asked me to join their advisory board, so I agreed. In the following weeks, the media attention settled into a steady stream. Interviews came from statewide radio, a legal podcast, even a national public television station covering elder rights. Still, I remained in my quiet rhythm. Tea in the morning, legal reviews by noon, calls with Francis, and walks with Angela in the park. I never chased fame. I simply said yes when the moment called for it. One night, I attended a small dinner hosted by an intergenerational support group. The event aimed to bridge understanding between older and younger neighbors. I sat at a long table with 30 people, some my age, many not. A young man leaned close and said, I watched your interview. I'm 24, living with my grandma. I didn't realize I should ask her about her paperwork. He raised his glass. Here's to you. The toast was simple, but my heart leapt. Then a woman in her 70s, stooped slightly, walked over. I remember when banks didn't listen to women, let alone elderly women. You showed them. and that matters. I held her hand firmly and thanked her. That night, walking home under streetlights, I thought, this wasn't my victory alone. It was ours, all of us, who need systems that respect us. In the days that followed, invitations continued to arrive. A nearby college asked me to guest lecture in a criminal justice course. A state senator requested the bank protocol be included in proposed legislation. Others called simply to thank me. I answered as best I could. I declined interviews that felt sensational. I agreed to panels that felt purposeful, and I returned home each day with the quiet conviction I always had. They tried to erase me at 80. They forgot one truth. That legacy is not just about inheritance. It's about influence. It's about teaching the next generation what protection looks like, without anger, without violence, with clarity. Because every voice matters, old and young alike. And sometimes the loudest sound in the room is composed of silence backed by fact. I never set out to be a pioneer. I simply wanted to protect what was mine, and in doing so discovered that my silence could be more powerful than any speech. A month after the bank incident, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of chamomile, reviewing messages I had received, invitations to speak, notes of thanks, opportunities to help others. I paused on one email from the Michigan Elder Rights Foundation, inviting me to co-found a nonprofit initiative. They wanted to call it Justice in Silence. A group of men and women had gathered, retired attorneys, financial advisors, social workers, who believed my story could be the backbone of a movement. They asked me to be co-founder and spokesperson. I agreed. We met in a sunny conference room at a community center. I looked around the table. There were people younger than my grandchildren and some older, many with tired eyes and hopeful hearts. We discussed mission, bylaws, outreach. We drafted plans for free legal clinics, training for bank employees, materials for senior centers. We debated logos and taglines. I spoke up when I could and listened when it mattered more. My role was clear. I would be the public face, and my story would be the catalyst for change. 6 weeks later, I stood on stage at the Michigan Senior Advocate Summit before an audience of nearly 500 attendees, seniors, advocates, bankers, and legislators. The room felt like a sea of lives shaped by experience, each line on their faces telling its own story. I stepped to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out. I began. Not long ago, I was an 80-year-old grandmother whose children forgot her birthday but remembered to transfer her name off a will. I signed, but I did not vanish. I prepared. I trusted legal structures. I let the bank speak for me. A hush spread through the crowd. I shared the timeline, the silent breakfast, the crisp signature on the will, the dual authorization directive at the bank weeks earlier. I told them how the bank froze my account, not because I screamed, but because I followed the rules. Then I said, that day, I became more than a retired clerk or a mother. I became a precedent. Not in court, but in community. I hope you will join me in becoming precedents too. I explained the mission of Justice in Silence. Legal empowerment workshops, teaching seniors to use their rights and protect their assets. Bank partnerships, working to adopt dual authorization policies statewide. Advocacy, encouraging legislators to include protections in elder law. Support networks, for those who feel isolated or silenced. During the Q&A session, a woman in the front row stood up. Her hands shook as she spoke. My daughter did something similar to me. I was so afraid I would lose everything. Your story, it gives me hope. Another man raised his hand. I am a banker. How can we implement dual authorization without stigmatizing customers? I responded, education, empathy. Systems don't have to be cold. They just need to be reliable. By the end, the room erupted in applause. Many filed past to shake my hand, hug me. A few cried quietly. I accepted each gesture with gratitude, but I also felt a current of responsibility flowing through me. After that event, the media interest grew anew. Local news aired the speech. A state newspaper published an op-ed I wrote, When Silence is Strategy. I was invited to a TV panel on elder financial abuse. I joined a task force to draft model legislation for banks dealing with senior clients. Despite the attention, I remained grounded. I wrote letters to other seniors I had met, encouraging them to start individual conversations with their lawyers, banks, and children. I visited nursing homes, not to preach, but to help residents organize legal support groups. I answered emails personally, typing each one with care. One afternoon, I received a call from a state senator's office. They were working on elder protection reform and wanted to include clauses inspired by my bank directive model. They asked for my guidance. I reviewed draft language with Francis and the nonprofit team. I suggested clearer wording, adding oversight checks to ensure families could not override protective directives without proper judicial review. My suggestions were accepted. When the bill passed unanimously in committee, just weeks later, I sat in the gallery, watching the chairman read my name into the record. Eleanor J. Harper, citizen advocate, whose example guided this legislation. I quietly pinched my robe. Later that week, Michigan's governor signed it into law. They invited me to the ceremony at the Capitol. I wore my Navy coat again. I carried no bouquet. I carried the story. Standing there, I thought back to that birthday morning. I remembered the table, the pen, the silence, and I realized I had not just recovered a bank account. I had found a voice that spoke for those who believed silence meant surrender and proved it could mean strategy. I returned home that evening and unlocked a handwritten letter from a woman in the Upper Peninsula. She spoke of living with her son, afraid of asking questions. Your story taught me I could ask. She wrote that they finally sat down with a lawyer together and added protective clauses to her finances. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer, next to the token necklace my husband gave me. By the time I put out my bedside lamp, I whispered thanks for that simple truth. Wisdom does not retire, and silence is sometimes the loudest artwork. And tomorrow I would wake up and continue. Because being a pioneer is not about one speech, it is about thousands of small, quiet moments built upon purpose and law. The house on Maple Street had stood silent for months. I first saw it from the bus window, its blue shutters faded, the grass grown too tall. It was the house my husband and I had built decades ago, our base, our roots. When I signed that will, I gave my name away, but never the memory of this place. I had no intention of leaving it empty. A few days after the new elder protection law passed, I finalized the plan. The house would become the Justice in Silence Legal Aid Center. I consulted with Francis and the nonprofit's board. We converted the upstairs into an office and meeting space. We installed simple desks, comfortable chairs, shelves filled with referral guides, pamphlets on elder rights, pictures of community events. My bedroom stayed the same. Faded quilt, small lamp, framed photo of Jonathan smiling on our wedding day. But down the hall, the warm kitchen now hosted weekly Know Your Rights clinics. The living room had been rewired for video recording, so I could shoot short legal tips for seniors who couldn't make it in person. And the back porch, the one we used for iced tea, now welcomed elderly neighbors on summer afternoons to talk quietly, confidentially. They had thought I was old. They had thought I was forgetful. But here I was, writing a script, signing a lease, scheduling appointments. Just as I once balanced budgets, I was now balancing justice and compassion, logic and heart. The day we officially opened, I recorded a short video. It began with me standing in the living room, evening light streaming through the windows. I spoke into the lens, voice calm. They thought an 80-year-old couldn't outsmart paperwork. They thought I didn't know where the law lived, but I did. Because I didn't just study it, I helped shape it. The camera panned to a framed highlight on the wall, my quote from the state bill signing ceremony, engraved under glass. The video cut to me reviewing documents with an elderly couple and a volunteer lawyer. Then it showed me standing behind the podium at a panel discussion in Lansing. I closed the video with these words. I was a mother who cooked dinner and wiped tears. And today, I am someone who hands out courage and counsel. I posted it on the nonprofit's homepage. It received thousands of views. Seniors called to say, "Thank you for making this real." They called the next day. Mr. Thompson, who'd lost his independence to a predatory family member. Mrs. Ramirez, whose bank refused to speak to her after her husband died. Several more asked for help with wills, guardianship, and housing fraud. I did not mind the calls. I was ready. Every morning, I poured a cup of tea and walked up the old wooden staircase, the same stairs our grandchildren had raced down on Christmas, and opened the center's door. I greeted volunteers. I settled into my desk, reviewed appointment schedules, answered emails. Most days ended with a walk in the yard, a moment with the photograph of our dog Peaches, who used to be buried under the magnolia tree. Over time, the house became more than consultancy. It became a symbol. Neighbors volunteered, local radio ran public service announcements, and the paper wrote feature stories. Eleanor Harper's house, where quiet justice speaks loudest. I remember the day I stepped into the living room and saw a framed letter from a family I had helped. Because of you, my mother is safe. Because of you, I know how to respect her. Thank you. I fingered the envelope. I felt equal parts sadness and satisfaction, reminders of why I began this. A year later, I stood in the same living room, with Frances beside me, signing final documents to secure the house as a nonprofit property. The deed would transfer to Justice in Silence forever. I held a pen, much like the one I used when I signed that will. My hand was steady. I was a mother, I said softly as I signed. And now I am the judge of fairness. I looked at Frances, then the small group of staff and volunteers. I felt no bravado, just responsibility. Later, the local news aired a closing segment. Me, seated at my desk, eyes gentle but unyielding, arranging my pen, as we labeled the clip. Justice doesn't retire, it resides. Walking home that evening, I passed under the old maple in front of the house. I felt the breeze and smiled. They had underestimated me. They had forgotten birthdays, but they underestimated the care I took with every document, every signature, every quiet moment of planning. I entered my home, not as a displaced mother, but as a guardian of wisdom. My house stood firm and warm. I was not the same woman the kids once dismissed. I was Eleanor, mother, widow, lawyer, advocate. And in the quiet of that house, I had found my voice and given others theirs. Thank you for staying with me until the very last word. If this story reminded you of your mother, your grandmother, or even yourself, know this. Quiet women are not weak. We carry the storm in silence, and when we speak, the ground remembers us. They tried to sign me away, but they forgot one thing. I built the house, and I knew where every nail went. Here on Grandma True Stories, we honor the women who never screamed, but never forgot. The ones who lost everything, and then took back what mattered. Not with fists, but with a fountain pen and a plan. If you believe these stories deserve to be heard, if you believe age doesn't erase wisdom, it sharpens it, then click, subscribe, share, stay, because revenge has no expiration date, and wisdom never retires.